Hello, friends, and welcome to Adventures in Pixie Land. My name's Amy. I'm an ordained minister. We're in Bible study. We are in the NIV. We are in the book of First Chronicles, and we are in chapter 10. Now, I know this seems like a lot of repeat. It is a lot of repeat. It is a long calling of names. Why? Because it was written while they were in exile. They didn't have access to the documentation, so everybody was writing down what they could remember so they could keep their culture active. Now, this is a particularly strong and important point in the history of Judaism. We're in the Old Testament, so we're in Judaism. And I know that's a little confusing because it's a Christian Bible. Why do we need this? When we say in fulfillment of the scriptures, Jesus is the Messiah. In fulfillment of the scriptures, these scriptures, the Old Testament scriptures, the one who predicted Jesus. You got to read what was going on so you can understand why he was predicted, where he was predicted, and how many times he was predicted. That's really what this is. Plus, a story of what not to do. This is key time in the history of Judaism, which Christianity stems from. It wasn't until they were in exile, being conquered by the Babylonians, and they believed they were in exile because they were unfaithful to their singular God. Because during that time, it was common to have household idols. Like all the things God was complaining about, archaeologically, when they look at it, the people were doing. There is evidence in the layers of household gods and all these other things, like God said, like was in here. They were told repeatedly, if you do not stop doing this thing, God is going to remove you from this land. And even when they broke into two nations, they were like, yeah, that's them. It's not our problem. And they were wrong. They were all taken because they wouldn't listen to the prophets. They didn't like what the prophets had to say, so they kept killing them. They kept, trying to make them enemies of the state because they didn't like what they were saying, just like the Pharisees and John the Baptist. See, it's baked into the mindset of not just this culture, but all the cultures. I mean, honestly, it's a human story, so it repeats. We are now in that time period in which they fully believe the reason they were removed is because they had multiple gods and they were writing down what they could remember. For them, this is like as if, you were sitting there and somebody was predicting the future right there in front of you, and you didn't believe them, and then it happened because they had prophets active and talking, which we'll get into in later chapters, that told them this was coming, and then it hit and lived through it. So they didn't have this, it wasn't far off and distant from them, this voice telling them that this was happening, and then it came true. So it's pivotal in the movement of Judaism as a religion. So it's what they can remember. And what you find out is little tidbits of their mindset and when that change happened. Because when that change happened, they were a conquered people who were not only allowed to go home, but the people who had conquered their people paid for the restoration of the temple. So when God's got you, he's got you, is what that is an overall lesson of. Now, we're in chapter 10. Saul takes his life. Suicide is never the answer. You don't do that. Okay? If you feel that way, there's a lot of different places to get help. Please reach out and get help. And just preemptively, trigger warning because of what it says. Now, the Philistines fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell slain on Mount Gilboa. Gilboa. The Philistines pressed hard after Saul and his sons, and they killed his sons Jonathan, Aminadab, and Malchishua. The fighting grew fierce around Saul, and when the archers overtook him, they wounded him. Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and abuse me." It's like, don't let me be captured because what they'll do to me is worse than death. Like, let me die an honorable death. But his armor bearer was terrified and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When the armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his sword and died. So Saul and his 3 sons died, and all his household died together. When all the Israelites in the valley saw that the army had fled and that Saul and his sons had died, they abandoned their towns and fled. And the Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They stripped him and took his head and his armor and sent messengers throughout the land of Philistine to proclaim the news among their idols and their people. They put his armor in the temple of their God and hung up his head in the temple of Dagon. Now, Dagon has been brought up in the Old Testament before. It's where when they conquered and they took the Ark of the Covenant there, and God kept knocking the statue down. Like, get this thing out of my way. Get this thing out of my presence. Until it kept breaking. So they felt the need. They got sores, and they gave the Israelites back the Ark of the Covenant with gold as penance, in the shape of the sin they had been struck down with. When all the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard everything the Philistines had done to Saul, all their valiant men went and took the bodies of Saul and his sons and brought them to Jabesh. Then they buried their bones under the great tree in Jabesh, and they fasted 7 days. It's quite a tribute. Saul died because he was unfaithful to the Lord. He did not keep the word of the Lord, and even consulted a medium for guidance, and did not inquire of the Lord. So the Lord put him to death and turned over the kingdom to David, son of Jesse. So, next chapter that you're going to need to come back for is going to talk about David, as you can see with the lead-in, because they are telling the story, and notice how they're pushing that story, because it's what happened, and he was told, and he didn't change. Not even when it was Samuel, he wouldn't hear, so then he was taken down. And that's what you're going to get to hear. Because like I said, this is the time frame in which it shifts from everybody had a pantheon to monotheism. Without this, it doesn't take off in other parts of the world either, or at least not the Middle East anyway. And it's that lens and that view that actually is everywhere as of to this day. So you just never know when you're reading what's important, and you never know what little tidbits you might find. So come back for the next video, friends.